Hello family, it's African Esquire and I'm here with a new video. Today I'm going to respond to an article that came out about China and their involvement in Africa. So China has released a statement saying that it will increase its military presence in Africa. The article lays out that China is looking to strengthen defense engagement in African countries, adding to its economic and commercial profile on the continent. That would complement existing Chinese ventures such as peacekeeping activities and weapons sales, as well as protecting Chinese assets, experts say. Of course, whenever we hear that any country that has practiced neocolonialism in Africa, whether it be China, whether it be Europe, whether it be any country, intends on not just practicing neocolonialism, but intends on bringing military force in order to enforce their neocolonial acts, that's always going to be something that angers us. And the thing that I want to emphasize is not necessarily that I want us to use this as a time to get angry, but first we need to realize that this is not something that just came about. China, many people have said that the reason why China has been so effective inside of Latin America or in the Caribbean and in Africa as far as soliciting cooperation with the governments is because China doesn't come in with force. I mean, it looks like it's better than America because a lot of times they're coming in with money. They're coming with promises. We're going to help build your roads. We're going to help develop your country. We're going to help build skyscrapers inside of your country. Therefore, we don't mean harm. We only mean you good. But I think the thing about the Chinese government is that it's very observant on how other people react to different things that happen. I think they're very observant on how Africans might feel resentment when the United States says they're going to do something. They're very observant on how Africans react to any European culture who has colonized Africa with military force. So I think that they're not just observant of that, but knowing that, they strategically made sure that they implemented first to get their money in there and get their interest in Africa and have the favor of the African presidents and African leaders before they decided to go in with military force. So I'm saying this to say that understand, number one, that this is where it was already planned. This is not something that just came about. This is something that they have foreseen maybe even 10, 20 years back. And that's where we have to get our mindset on thinking offensively and not just defensively. Stokely Carmichael said that whenever we are basing our actions on reacting instead of on planning and thinking forward, if we're just reacting to the things that are done to us by our oppressors, then it's not revolutionary. So if police brutality, if we only have riots for police brutality whenever someone gets killed, well, that means that it's the oppressor who holds the keys. It's the oppressor who pushes the button. It's not us who pushes the button. If we can't get ourselves to be angry before it even happens, if we can't get ourselves to be conscious of what's going on and to want to do some type of action to end those types of regimes before someone has to get killed, then whenever we do react and we do go out into the streets protesting, there's nothing revolutionary about that because it's just going to happen again. And essentially we are at the will, our actions are really at the will of when they will or will not kill us. So in the same matter, if our reaction to hearing that China is planning on moving their military into Africa, if our reaction is only to be angry, then that's not a revolutionary action. We're just allowing and perpetuating the same thing happening. The other thing is we have to understand that we have to really get out of thinking about now and start thinking about the future, because the thing I'm realizing more and more is that people on Wall Street, people in all types of countries that have power, they really think ahead. They're not just thinking about, okay, what can I get today, or what's going to be right today, what can I see happen today. They're thinking about, if I do this today, how's that going to affect me 10 years from now? How's that going to affect me 20 years from now? And if African people internationally stop reacting so much to things, and I know that's a very hard thing to ask because we live in the social media era where we're constantly bombarded with information, and we are the most oppressed people on the globe. So as the most oppressed people on the globe, there's always stories to tell. There's always things to get angry at. There's always things to get mad at. And by all means, you should absolutely get mad at those things because hopefully if you're more conscious of things, you'll stop accepting things. At the same time, while we allow ourselves to get mad at those things, we can't stop planning. We can't stop thinking about how is it that we're going to make sure that Africa, or make sure if you're in Haiti, how are we going to make sure that Haiti, how are we going to make sure that any of our places are protected from foreign interests, and that it can't just be one country says, hey, I'm going to go into Haiti, I'm going to go into Africa, I'm going to go into anywhere and just do what I want. How do we protect our assets? How do we protect our countries? How do we protect our communities? That's how we have to be thinking. We can't just be thinking about, if you're African in America, obviously police brutality is always a hot issue, but we can't just be thinking about getting a conviction. We have to think about how do you end the whole system, not just end the whole system of police oppression, but how do you protect not just your community once they're in poverty, but how do you protect them from being in poverty in the first place? How do you protect them from being powerless? How do you gain power? If you're not thinking proactively, then you're always going to be reacting to these things. Like I said, China is the one thing I want to say about China, they're very observant as a country, and that's the thing that I realized. And I think that also carries on to for Africans in America, that also carries on to, if you notice, in America, they're very observant on what groups will tolerate what things from them. So I'll give you an example. We know that the black hair care industry is dominated by Chinese businesses. Although there's no way in hell that Chinese people would allow African people to dominate their hair business, but for some reason they figured out that we will tolerate that. We will go, knowing that there's a black hair store down the street, we will go to give our money to the people who don't even use the same products, because they understand our weaknesses. They're very observant on what our practices are. That's also why, if you look at most ghetto neighborhoods, what's the big restaurant? The big restaurant is almost always going to be a Chinese restaurant. It's rarely going to be a soul food restaurant. The soul food restaurant might get some play, but more than likely the people who just want something quick to eat, they're going to go to the Chinese restaurant. So they're very observant on our practices, on what we will stand for and what we will not stand for. And if you're really observant like that, you can plan on how you're going to make money off of those things. You can plan on how you're going to gain power through people. So our weaknesses are on full display to the world, and knowing that we have these weaknesses, we have to focus on closing those gaps. We have to focus on preventing further exploitation. And if anything, if anyone should be exploiting us, it should be us. And that sounds horrible, because hopefully we wouldn't be exploiting each other, but it shouldn't be that people can come from outside of the community and come into the community and be the one who solicits your money, be the one who has the businesses in your community, be the one who is paying your politicians to do what they want you to do and not what is best in the best interest of the people. These are all actions that happen in America. So getting back to the issue in Africa, I think they're very observant on how corruption is in Africa. And I personally, I often hear African people say how corrupt their countries are, and they're definitely corrupt, but I never want to lose sight that they're corrupt for a reason. Every one of the countries that has corruption is because there's people getting paid off of that corruption, and those people are not in Africa. Of course, there are people, the politicians, who are taking bribes and who are taking money to basically screw their people over. But when we're talking about who really makes the money from these deals, it's the people in Europe, the people in America, and the people in China. So we do have this corruption issue, but understand that they're very observant on those types of issues, and they can figure out how to manipulate it for their own interests. So if anything, number one, we have to stop not being so observant of other people and how they view us. But we also have to protect ourselves and our own assets, and we have to think forward, not just about how do we get out of this situation, how do we stop the military from coming in, but how do we stop the nature of powerlessness in the beginning. We should not be okay with being powerless, even if no one is taking advantage of it. The fact that the United States might not have completely colonized Africa, the fact that Europe might not decide to recolonize Africa, that should not be enough to us. We should be only content when we know that we are not in a powerless state to where if they decided that they wanted to, they could. The fact that China could be doing this, that should be what upsets us. The fact that China sees that we are weak in these areas, sees that we are weak in unity, sees that we are weak in developing our own resources, sees that we are weak and having our conscience awakened enough to say that, hey, these diamonds are in our backyard. What makes you think you can come from Europe and dig up our diamonds? The fact that we are not conscious of these things, the fact that we are not angry about these things, those are all weaknesses that can be exploited. So I say this to say, let's take this as for us who organize, for us that are political activists, for us who are trying to do something to change the way things go. We have to take this as ammunition to say that we should not be in a state that the Chinese government would have the audacity. And I say the audacity because I could never imagine China saying, oh, we have businesses in the United States, we're going to increase our military presence in America because we have to protect our businesses in the United States. You would never hear them say that, because you have to have real audacity, and you have to know that those people are so depleted in their anger and in their outrage to be able to make that statement and still go into those countries and still take those resources. So the fact that they have the audacity to say that should be a green light to us to say, no, we're not going to continue on in this powerless state. It doesn't. We could start at one country at a time. We could go the whole continent at a time. But the idea that we would remain powerless over our own resources, over our own businesses, our own economics, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in America, whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're in Europe, that is completely outrageous. It should not be something that we're okay living with as African people. So that's all I have, and I will see you all in another video.